We are so pleased that all of you could join us here today. Just to give you a bit of background about the SLPN is the Sports Law and Policy Network. And the SLPN Dialogues are a series of sessions which aim to serve as a platform for collaboration, professional and institutional capacity building with a view to enhancing the sports law and policy framework in India and ultimately benefiting the entire Indian sports ecosystem. Today's topic for discussion is the impact of biobubbles on athlete mental health. And we are very privileged to have with us a panel which has really been in the thick of things in terms of actually having spent time in a biobubble, as well as directly working with athletes who have had first-hand experiences of having to spend time in these secure bubbles. Let me introduce you to our panel today. We have with us Paddy Upton, high performance coach, author, and professor. Paddy helped lead the Indian men's national cricket team to win the 2011 ICC Cricket World Cup for the first time in 28 years. He is also the author of the best-selling book, The Barefoot Coach, Life-Changing Insights from Coaching the World's Best Cricketers. Our second panelist today is H.S. Prannoy. Prannoy is an international badminton player, a 2018 Commonwealth Games gold medalist, and a 2018 Asian Championships bronze medalist. Our third panelist for today is Dr. Chaitanya Sridhar, mind coach at Peak Performance Consultancy and sports psychologist with the Royal Challengers Bangalore IPL team. And finally, our moderator for the session today is Amrut Joshi, founder, GameChanger Law Advisors, Bangalore. Welcome to the panel. Before I hand over to Amrut, I'd just like to let everybody know that if you have any questions, do type them in to the chat box below, and our panelists will try to answer some of them either during the session or at the end. Over to Amrut to take this discussion forward.
Thank you so much, Shan. It's a privilege to be moderating this eminent panel. And on behalf of the audience, it is my obligation to make sure that we make the best use of the next 45 to 50 minutes and get as many questions answered by this eminent panel. So I'm going to dive straight in. I think just a couple of points to keep in mind for the audience when they do send in their questions as well. One, to make sure that the conversation is conducted in an organized manner and we get the most out of the panelists. We'll keep audience questions possibly to the end of the session, maybe the last 10 minutes or so. I think I think a couple of the panelists have actually worked in environments where there's a lot of confidential information that is shared with them. So the idea here is for them to share their experiences in an anonymized and general fashion. So if you are asking questions, my request to you would be to refrain from asking questions directed at how a particular player responds or how a particular team responds, but rather keep it more on the lines of the issue that you would like them to address as well. So with this, I will dive straight into the discussion. And I'll actually start with Prannoy. And Prannoy, actually reading about your experiences over the last 1 month itself, I think it'll give a lot of us non-sports persons a lot of gray hair. So you've actually had to fight with COVID-19, and then also at the same point in time live in a bubble for a certain period of time, um, outside of India as well. And so just wanted to start by asking, the first question for you would be, how was your fight against COVID? And as a professional athlete, what were some of the unique takeaways for you from this fight against COVID?
First of all, hi everyone. I think it's a very interesting topic which we are discussing today, and I think in the coming days, this is going to be one of the most important things to be taken care of when we are going for sporting events. Um, so yeah, for me, I think the last 1 month has been pretty much a roller coaster. Being tested positive for COVID-19, and then from there on, uh, coming out of it and then participating in a World Super Series event was one of the toughest journeys which I had in my career, and I would rate this as one of the toughest journeys because um, things were what do you say very unclear. I would say that was the right way to put it across, because I think the day when I got tested positive, uh, and the next 14 days I was alone in Hyderabad, and uh, the mental stage, or the mental uh, uh, the way I handled it, I think I was say pretty much good at it. But then I never thought that it had such impact mentally, and because before the COVID came, I mean, we all thought that if the COVID comes, you just have to isolate for 2 weeks, and that's it. You can just come back and you can just train, and you'll be all right. But then when it actually hit me, I think I understood the fact that this is not good. And once I finished the 14 days of quarantine, I came back to the training sessions. I was feeling very low, and the body just could not take the load of uh, the virus. And I think the next few weeks was a or very slow gradual progress to the fitness. And I was making sure that if any of the pains comes, then I need to back off. And but I think the tricky part was here, when, because during the COVID time I had a lot of cough, and it was persisting for more than 2 weeks. There was a weird pain which was coming into my ribs, and unfortunately the doctors didn't have any answers for it, and I'm still fighting to get rid of that pain. It has been on and off, and in Thailand also it was pretty much bothering me during the matches. Whenever I was breathing heavily, I could feel that a rib was paining bad. And I think yeah. So post that 2 weeks of slow graduation, I understood the fact how much effect it had. I mean, the 2 weeks of quarantine, or the 2 weeks of COVID in your body or in your system, how much that affected your entire body. And uh, once I went to the Thailand also, I thought after 2 weeks of training I would be totally good enough to play a Super Series, but then I was totally wrong. I think I'm still in a process where I'm trying to get back to the full fitness. And I think when I talk about the bubble over here, the things which was totally new for us in Thailand, because this was the first time where we went onto a bubble, and it was totally new, and it was totally um, surprising actually, because we didn't know anything about what was going to happen in Thailand. And once we landed, we came to know what is the schedule. And for 2 weeks, absolute 2 weeks, we could not go out of the room. Um, we were only allowed to go to the practice hall. We were only allowed to go to the main hall, and we were only allowed to get into the bus. We were not allowed to walk even outside the stadium, and that was the protocol. Probably after 3-4 days, that's where you start to feel that mentally, because you're not allowed to go out to have say sunlight, or you cannot go out and have a walk. You just have to sit in the room for 22 hours and say in a day, because only time we were training was say 2 hours in the day, and that is 22 hours we were inside the room. We cannot meet any of our friends in the team itself, and that was a nightmare, I would say, because post 5 days, post 6 days, it was getting to me, and I was alone in my room. So it was totally, I mean, I was not able to understand how to handle it, because this was the first time I kind of faced it. But I guess the things which I did during those 14 days was very crucial, because I knew that I had a match to play after 8 days, and the the mind frame should not be in a very negative side. So it was very important for me to keep the positives and to look the positive sides of what was happening. And I think I took a lot of time to write and make sure that what do I do the next day. I mean, what is my program for the next day, and probably write it down and see, at this time I'm going to do this. And in the room itself, if I'm able to read something new, or if I'm able to watch something new, and probably write down a calendar, saying that that kind of helped, I would say, mentally, because if you are sitting in a room for say more than 15 to 16 hours, then you don't know what to do actually. So this was the first time I felt it. And I think in the coming days it would obviously help me better, because now I have a vague idea of, okay, this is how it's going to happen. So from the next time, I think I would be much prepared to face something like this. And I think it's very important as a player's perspective that they find something new during the tournament time, and start to explore that side and make yourself busy doing that. So yeah, so I think it was a totally different experience for me, and hope
Fantastic.
you don't have to go through it again and again.
Absolutely, absolutely. We'd all pray that no one has to go through this as well. Just delving a little more. So, what was that something new that you picked up during the quarantine period, which kept you sane in that sense?
Well, no, I mean, I'm a guy who totally explores new things in life, and I'm pretty much slow to it to accept. But then once I start getting a knack of it, then I slowly get into it. So since last few months, I have been getting into a sector which I am totally unknown, which is stock market investing, and it sounds very out of the picture, but then I didn't want anything which is related to the game, because that keeps you annoying at times. That keeps you pretty much disturbed at times, because you want to go out and play over there, but you are not getting a chance. On
Right.
top of it, you are thinking too much about the game, then that kind of doesn't work for me. So I just wanted something which is totally out of the game. So since few months I have been studying a lot of stock market, basic stock market, and things surrounding the stock market, which is a very vast subject. So I think you have a lot of things to explore in that subject. So I was trying to get into those.
Okay,
Prannoy, can you let us know when you're ready for me to invest in your asset management business, please?
You can already send me a mail. I shall start investing from your side too.
Okay, so I'll send you some money. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. No, I mean, that's really interesting to know. And I think so. At the same time, I mean, there's also one part of your mind that's probably prompting you to say, "Hey, Prannoy, you need to practice. There's a match coming up in 2 weeks from now," but you're stuck within this hotel room. Uh, how much of a fear is there that you'll probably lose your entire physical conditioning for a game? And how can you make sure that that your physical condition does not deteriorate to such an extent that you can't step out to play the day you're off quarantine? So what are what are other things that you need to bear in mind? Because I guess how you eat, what are some of the other things you do? I think it's a mix of both physical and mental. Is that something that's fair to say, or am I completely off the mark here?
No, no, you have. I think you're absolutely spot on, because there are a lot of factors surrounding your performance, and it's not just your physical fitness. It's about how mentally you're fresh, how your diet plan is going, and all of these things actually matters. And I think, as you said, it's really important that you don't go off the chart while you are during the quarantine, and you have very high chances of going off the track, because you are mentally, you are like I'm done with it. Yeah, I mean, during our quarantine also, I think for the first 2-3 days we are not even allowed to go outside the room, but post 3 days we are allowed to go and train, but that was only for an hour. So what I was doing was, I was seeing other European players doing online sessions on Instagram. So I was doing the same live program with them for an hour. It's not to do the program, it's about finding something new, totally in that lockdown. And I think that helped, because I was doing in my room. I had two beds. I pushed one bed towards one side, and the whole room was mine. And I was trying to do whatever activities I could do in the room. And I think this is the way we kind of managed it. But I think it's really important that mentally you should be knowing that everybody is going through this. Nobody is having an exemption out of this, and everybody is going through this, and everybody is going to perform the next week, and everybody is going to play like this the next week. So you don't have an excuse saying that I couldn't train, or I saying I was in the room. I think it's kind of same to everyone. So you make sure that you do more than what you actually do, because you don't get to play very often. So you just need to train as much as you can in the room, and make sure that you're physically up there.
One last question before I move to Paddy and Chaitanya and bring them into the conversation as well. Did you actually have someone like Paddy or Chaitanya advising you through this period? I mean, I'm just throwing their names out there, but someone equivalent?
No, I was not having anyone who was helping me at this time, because I'm very selective when I choose people whom I work with. Uh, I don't know. That's how I have been. Since quite some time, I've not been working with anyone. I've been working with someone I had during 2019, just before the lockdown. I was working with someone, but then post lockdown, I haven't worked with someone. So it just yeah, I'm just waiting for the right time. So yeah.
Okay. I'll actually switch. Thanks so much, Prannoy. Those are really very, very interesting insights to get from a high performance athlete such as yourself. Just bringing, Paddy into the conversation. Paddy, you've worked with so many athletes and teams over, several decades now. And I think this is probably, COVID, the occurrence of COVID could possibly lead us to a situation where we can understand how mental conditioning worked pre-COVID and how it's possibly going to work from the time COVID has set in. And if I were to ask you, what are some of the unique experiences that you've been able to glean over the last year or so in terms of how different athletes and teams have reacted to the situations that they've been thrown into, whether in a bio bubble, whether because they've tested positive for COVID and they've recovered from there. So what would be something that's very unique? Because I think, just to wrap up the question, athletes are used to a very hectic lifestyle, and it was the case even pre-COVID, like moving from hotel to hotel, from place to place. So it's not that being confined within hotel rooms is something that's come up only because of COVID. I think what COVID has done is that they're just confined to that space for extended periods of time. We've seen cricketers, we've seen so many other athletes share their experiences or around mental depression, even pre-COVID as well. So what would you say are some of the distinguishing experiences that you've seen now since the onset of COVID?
Thanks for that, Amrut. Thanks very much for inviting me onto the panel, and to those listeners who've tuned in. You know, I think one of the things that COVID I've certainly seen is done across the board, not just on sport, is it's pulled the carpet back on the dust that many people have swept under the carpet. So people in relationships, for example, and when there's been relationship problems that they've swept under the carpet, COVID and lockdown has just pulled that carpet back and revealed that dust, that dirt, those cracks. At the same thing in team environments, the same thing with individuals. So it's really just turned the volume up on stuff that was there, sort of background noise in the system, if I could speak. And if I then to relate that to your question is, I've always been a firm believer that the environment or the culture around an athlete, be it an individual or a team, is probably the strongest influence on that player's mind. It's not me as the mental coach doing a one-on-one with that individual for 1 hour, maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks. That's a very minor input into their life. They're constantly having the noise and the influence of the environment or the system influencing their mind and their way of behavior. And that system or culture or team environment is created, and it gets life as a result of how the senior influencers or leaders manage and conduct themselves. So a very simple example, if you have a coach and or a captain who shouts and screams and gets really disappointed when someone makes a mistake, I will show you a team that is filled with fear of failure. If you have a team, and conversely, like for example, beautiful examples, the under-19 cricketers that are coming through Rahul Dravid, and we're already seeing the benefits of that in the cricket world. Someone who doesn't get upset about mistakes, he's very allowing of mistakes, and he really frees players' minds up to be able to just go and express and perform. And if they make mistakes, it's okay, you have a good conversation. And if they do well, it's okay, you have a good conversation. So there's a real equanimity and calmness. So that is what then conditions those players' mind, although Rahul's not stepping into the role of mental conditioning coach. And we're seeing that now in this last test match. These youngsters come in a really high pressure situation. I think having come through Rahul Dravid is a significant part of that result and that success of those youngsters. So even more specifically to your question, we've always known from a mental conditioning sports psychology side that the culture is so important. In business, we hear this rhetoric that culture eats strategy for breakfast or culture before strategy. But I think we've paid largely lip service to that. And the mental conditioning coaches and the sports psychologists, they're not the ones who create the culture and can really influence the culture, but we can support the leadership in bringing awareness to how they're speaking, how they're behaving, what kind of culture that ideally like to create, and then coach the leaders around how to behave in a way that that culture naturally forms around them. What COVID has done all of a sudden is, and what we're saying as mental coaches, is that what goes on off the field creates the culture more so than what goes on the field, because players spend more time in the team environment, or like Prannoy said, so many hours by himself in his hotel room compared to on the court or on the cricket field or the hockey ground. So what we see now is with people stuck in their hotel rooms and with all these restrictions, that unique influence and environment is really playing on players' minds and creating so much space for so much thinking to happen and the mind to really run riot. And it's in this space that if players are left alone, like unfortunately what's happened to Prannoy, you end up, your mind just goes all over the show, and it's just random whether you actually have the discipline to find a good distractions, or if you actually, which a lot of players have done, is they get caught up in the anxiety, the depression, the emptiness. Particularly extroverts will be struggling more in the bio bubbles than introverts, because they need people in interaction. Introverts are more happy and okay in their own space. So and coaches who have done a really good job of building, giving players things to do, occupying players' minds, creating opportunities and influencing them during those downtime, or end up when it comes to game time, you have players arriving nice and fresh in their mind. Whereas where there hasn't been good interventions and helping players get through the bio bubbles, what happens is you're having players arrive at a game and they're mentally exhausted because they've played the game over and over and over in their mind. And while they might be physically a little bit less fit because they haven't had access to the gym and training grounds like they previously did, they arrive mentally exhausted because they've played the game over in their head more times than what they've ever done before.
Okay. And I think one other question for you, and because you've already possibly seen athletes go in and come out of bubbles as well. If I were to ask you, are there, if we had to do a survey today, does the survey bear out the fact that introverts are finding bio bubbles, a lot more easier to handle than extroverts, or is the jury still out on that?
So it's a very good question, and it's not as simple as introvert, extrovert. There's other dynamics that when you start putting into the picture, you start getting a more detail and granularity. So for example, young players who are just so grateful for the opportunity to be at an IPL or at a tournament or at the beginning of their career, they bring the enthusiasm and they tend to navigate the bio bubbles more easily because they're so excited. More senior players who've been there, done that, they're so used to traveling, they've got families and maybe young children at home, introverts or extroverts, those players are really struggling because they know what it was like for 10 years previously. They've got that frame of reference and they can see this is so much more difficult. It's so much more of a hack. I'm away from my family. I'm away from my friends. I can't go out and I can't go to a restaurant. In fact, one of the teams in the IPL, one of the players I was working with said the best thing about being in their bio bubble was they were allowed to order food from outside. So his highlight was eating a different meal from a different country each day. I mean, as an international athlete, when that becomes the highlight of your day, it's quite a grim situation. So it depends on, as I said, introvert, extrovert, the stage in their career. I say that about youngsters, they navigate more easily because they're grateful for the opportunity. But you also have the situation where there's a youngster who's new in a team who hasn't yet integrated and doesn't feel part or belong. The bio bubble makes it even more difficult for them to integrate. And some of the youngsters have had a very, very lonely experience because each person is just in survival mode and they're not integrated. So there's a number of factors that we know some of them, and there's quite a few that we don't yet know. And I think it's because we actually haven't done enough research to get feedback from all the different players. What were your unique challenges, and get that nice. We hear all these medical people that say we can't approve this drug and that drug until we've done the trials. Well, have we gathered the research? There's been enough bio bubbles around the world now, but I'm not seeing large scale interventions where International Cricket Council or the badminton guys or the football people or the BCCI say, let's do an extensive study, get feedback from players so we at least can understand what are the dynamics. And I don't think we've seen the fallout yet. And there's a potential that we will still see more fallout with more mental problems and illnesses as a result of extended bio bubbles. And I think some of them are preventable, but we're not doing all we can to prevent them. So we've got to wait until they present, which is unfortunate for the athletes.
Bringing Dr. Sridhar into the conversation, actually. And I think taking off from where Paddy left off as well, right? It's also about, I think Paddy spoke about the culture that's created within the team environment. Having been with various teams at levels of professional sport, working in academies, working with individuals, working with professional teams, how much of the culture is something that is consciously created by support staff, and how much of it is just something that can be created by the personality of leaders? Paddy was referring to Rahul Dravid, or I don't want to take it individually, but so just some thoughts, initial thoughts on how much of this can actually be created versus how much of it is actually, a reflection of the leader's personality.
Thanks, Amrut. And can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Yes. And I thoroughly enjoyed listening to both. And Prannoy, I have to say, so inspiring, very, very inspiring. Amrut, tough question, okay, to start off with. So I totally agree with the culture, and something that I always say, especially when we work with teams and academies and leagues, is the 360-degree approach. I very much believe in that, be it with at an individual level or even at a group or the largest setting. From an athlete, let's say whether it's someone like a badminton or a cricket player, you're getting one perspective. When you have the family in, you have the one perspective, then you have the coach. So when someone comes to me at an individual, I'm just going, okay, you have one perspective here. When you work with a team, now it's very much depends on what is this leadership group, this group that Paddy was speaking of. And I have to say that it has to be top down. Your athlete, your team is not going to perform if you're not giving them that environment. And coming to your question, I think it's both. We're really trying from both ends. We want it to happen, like someone like Rahul Dravid. Okay, so if we take him, he's been an elite cricketer, he's been the wall of Indian cricket, and look at the trickling effect he's had. But it's also not been magical. He had that access. Now, then when you look at an academy or a setup, this individual was taking decisions on what basis is he taking. And I believe in a very relational approach, something that for me, which what I saw worked really well at RCB and with the academies I work with, is how relational. So your leadership group. So when I say leadership group, I work very closely with, the head coach, the captain, and if there's a cricket ops director or the academy head. What you notice, the feedback, sometimes it doesn't, like Paddy was saying, it cannot go from you, or maybe you might have a minuscule effect, but you might notice something, let's say at the dinner table, or you might actually hear something. And then you actually look at, okay, what best can we do? Does this need to come from me? Do I need to go direct, or do I need to go indirect? So it's a lot of intricate, small things which happen. And then the point is, okay, how are you bringing this information? It's not going to be magic. How you prepare, what you've done, and over time, it takes time to build up, So how have we opened up this space? And then in a bio bubble, especially if you're looking at it's already so complicated. For me, the other thing which really stood out and stands out is communication. And I work across, I work with cricketers across, India, though of course you had to pause some of them due to franchise concerns. But there were some franchises which did not keep them in the loop. There was no communication. First of all, is IPL going to happen, not happen, what's happening? So, that's the key. And also this whole thing of COVID se ye ho jayega, this is going to happen. And we're stuck, everyone's stuck, right? So what do you do? For me, the lockdown, so pre-IPL. So I'm going to take IPL as an example here because that was very first hand. Pre-IPL, and what I saw with cricketers, what I saw with athletes across the spectrum really prepared me for what's going to happen. And with our group, especially the younger ones and stuff, we were, there was a lot of work which went in, whether that was online, whether that was just communication. And, in this period, it wasn't even so much about performance, but it was that sense of belief, creating that community. And I think when Prannoy said, like, doing these online things one-on-one, with the group, you somewhere feel, okay, I'm here, I'm held. And I think that is very important. So, I follow the Jungian school of thought. And for us, we look at an individual, holistically. So you cannot just say performance, just shut off everything and go perform. That's not going to happen. Everything is going to affect. Of course, and in India, there's also the concern of, I'm okay. An athlete's in that really bad state, but this whole thing of portraying, I'm fine. So it takes a while to go, okay, it's okay. And then bring them to that space. So it's a lot of these minuscule, what we call trickle effect, but which comes from the entire group. So I may have contributed, but it doesn't matter from whom it comes. Is the leadership group is each individual in that team feeling held? Or, can we actually watch out, even if we won something, and another player has not performed, can we actually hold space? So is there that sense of community? That comes down a lot to, your choice of your leadership group, your management concerns, and it's both ends. So I had to bring this in to answer your question because there was no direct answer as such.
Sure. I think two follow-up questions, and I think Paddy and Chaitanya, feel free to dive in as whoever's more interested in answering this question as well. One, what kind of routines do you prescribe for individuals or teams within when they are in that bio bubble, and how much of it is like if you had 24 hours in a day, how much work would that entail? You actually having to do in that 24-hour time frame with individual athletes or with teams as a whole as well. And when do you draw the line and say, this is too much of information, this is too much of communication, and it's better for us to possibly step back and just let them be as well?
I'll maybe jump in briefly. So different players have very different relationships to routine. And I think that's very important to know what is your how much routine do you ideally like that gets the best out of you. And in these bio bubbles, the rule of thumb for me has been have about 5% to 10% more routine than what you normally have to structure yourself through the day. So very routine players have a very structured program, hour by hour, what you're going to do, because that's what their learning preference is. Other players who like to be more spontaneous and impulsive, for example, that's me. I really don't like routine, but I need to make sure that I've got some small amounts of key pieces that I know I've got those touch points over the course of the day. And the other thing that, and Prannoy, spoke about it, there is time to do something different. So I really encourage, and it's worked nicely, players to do something that you've never done before. Find a new interest, find a new hobby, find a new something. Was interestingly, one of the things that I got the best feedback was one of the players liked music, and I just randomly asked him, it wasn't a question I'd even thought about. I said, and what about dancing? Because you're sitting in a room now. I said, do you like dancing? He said, no, I'm not a good dancer. I said, great. For this IPL, you love your music. You're gonna spend every day as exercise and to learn. You're gonna spend 20 minutes. Was his decision. So he spent 20 minutes a day dancing in front of the mirror, and he had so much fun laughing at himself because he was so bad, but nobody was watching. And he got the exercise, he had fun. At the end of the time now, he says he can't wait for places to open up that he can actually arrive. And all of a sudden now people are going to see, wow, this guy can dance where he could never dance before.
Right.
And it was a very prominent international cricketer. I'd love, maybe he'll one day talk about it. He'll post on his Instagram, look at the new skill that I learned in IPL.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what Paddy said. I want to add one more point. There are, what's your 3 non-negotiables? You actually have to have 3 non-negotiables. Because I remember just when we went into this extreme lockdown, I had cricketers waking up at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. And, it was going, and you're talking of international athletes, not just cricketers here. And you kind of go, okay, you take a break for some time and then come back. And of course, the routine is also important so that your mind doesn't go off. There's a reason that we have the routines. But don't get so stringent with the routine that, okay, I'm just obsessing on this. Try something new is something I definitely advise. It challenges you, and the brain, then releases dopamine and serotonin. So, and especially for athletes who are so used to the movement and moving around, that aspect becomes very important. Because when you have a lot of spare time, if you start overthinking, then you get into the other end of cortisol, which we don't want. We don't want the negative stress related. So yeah, and one aspect that I'd also, something which has worked a lot, especially in these bio bubble times, is knowing that, what is it that you're focusing on, and that, why are you here? So getting that focus back to what's the goal. So somewhere, especially with these athletes who are very anxious, there's some of them, especially the younger ones, who can be a little more anxious, getting them to go, okay, What's my goal? How do I come back? So, and knowing that this is something which there is light at the end of the tunnel, one day at a time. One day at a time is something which has worked a lot very well with my athletes.
Right. I think we've, okay, so I think a few other things that I had on my list, and I'm assuming after that we can also open it up for audience questions as well. Prannoy, I mean, you mentioned that, you were fine without having someone like Paddy or Chaitanya by your side. But if you had to possibly apply your mind to this particular question, I mean, would individual athletes playing badminton at various levels in India today benefit from a structured approach where you have a mental conditioning coach, at least giving them advice frequently? Because again, we also have to remember that many sports federations in India today can't afford the services of several professionals that accompany, say a cricket team or a football team, right? So individual sports have their own dynamics. So what is it that, if you had a wish list from the Badminton Federation of India, what would you like them to see? What would you like them to do in the coming days to ensure the mental well-being of badminton players?
Yeah, as you said, yeah, I mean, it's totally right. I mean, psychologists are too expensive these days. So, yeah, for the sport, it's kind of tough to accommodate someone in your team, because we have physios, we have trainers, we have other people who are already in the team, and that kind of takes it too low. So, but if you ask me, I think it's a must thing which you need to perform at the highest level, because I have been playing in the top level in the last, say, for the last 8 years, and I have tried so many people in the last 8 years. I've tried so many psychologists, so many of them, because for me personally, I take a lot of time to, say, settle in with someone, and you have that comfort zone where you share each and everything, and for me personally, that needs to be very much specific to the sport, and things I am doing on the court. I need my psychologist to work on that aspect, and that is which is very important for me. And as you said, yeah, for us in our country, the system is not right, where we don't get the services of very good psychologists in our country, and only few of them, only the elite players who are in the top, say the cream, uh, probably gets to avail the services. But like even in Thailand, I remember um, I got tested positive, and because I was already positive, so there was high chances of me again coming positive. Me and Saina got positive just the day before the match, and it was one of the most taxing days, because from morning till night we both were in the hospital, and we didn't know what was happening. There was no communication at all, and we were told that we had to be in quarantine for 10 days in Thailand. We cannot play the tournament. Our entries had been withdrawn from the tournament because we tested positive. All these dramas were happening. At the end of the day, they said, no, you are free to go because you have antibodies in your body. And imagine I'm coming back from the hotel at 9:30 in the night, and next day morning I have a match. And 9:30 I'm sleeping, I'm getting up in the morning, then I'm coming to know that, okay, my match has been shifted to the night. All this drama has been happening, and I think at these kind of junctures you need someone whom you can share all these things, and because as a professional player you just know how to play. I mean that's the truth behind it, and you don't know how to handle all these situations. So I wish I had someone to talk to, so that I could probably be a little bit more calm before the match, and probably just focus on things which I actually need to, because you have social media which is happening on the, say, the left hand side. You have your phone which is on your right hand side, where tons of messages are coming because you are in a bio bubble. So all these things are big distractions, and we have a match to play. So I think at this point is where psychologists come in play. They can actually help you guide that day on what all things needs to be done. So I hope in the next 5 years we have a structure in place where all the players get the services of psychologists and the entire team, because that's a big part of the game. And you never know, because someone who is playing at top 20, or probably who is struggling around 30-40 in the world, might just go to top 10 because of certain changes in their schedule. And I think one is extremely focusing on the psychological factors and the things which are disturbing you. So I hope we have a structure in place in the next couple of years at least.
Could I jump in?
Can
there
I just chip in? Oh.
Yeah, go ahead.
Prannoy, I wanted to say you now have that's what I want to say. I mean, I think it's you do have people, so please reach out, and I think that's the message I want to get across as well. Yes, Paddy, you can go on. I'll come back.
So I'm just going to put my coaching cap on here and talk directly to the participants on this call. So we talk about bio bubbles and athletes and that. I think the important thing is that you're extracting what we're talking, not just the interest value, but how is what we're saying relevant in your life? And if you're not taking one thing out of this conversation that you can actually apply practically into whatever your chosen profession is, then it probably wasn't a great use of your 1 hour. And so with that thinking, and for me, the pinnacle, one of the most common things amongst the best athletes in the world, and I've been lucky to work across 11 different sports across the world and over 100 professional athletes. And one of the most consistent things with the best athletes is they are their own best coach. And what they do is they use other people to add information and add knowledge and add different things to their own library of their own game. But at the end of the road, they are the authority in their game and their life. They don't defer to the coach to tell them what to do. They don't defer to a sports psychologist to tell them what to do. What I'm hearing Prannoy is, he said, I've tried a whole lot of people and not many worked. It says to me, he is taking responsibility for his learning and he's trying all the stuff. And you try stuff and it doesn't work. So I don't think any athlete should have the reliance on a coach or a mental coach or reliance on anybody, but certainly to use whatever knowledge, whatever skills, so you can further your own game. But at the end of the road, you want to be the expert in your own game and your own life. So that to me is the pinnacle of high performance, is getting to that level of expertise. As opposed to a lot of athletes look around and rely on coach, tell me what to do. S&C coach, tell me how to train. Dietitian, tell me how to eat. If you're in that space and you're waiting for other people to tell you what to do, you're not quite going to get to the pinnacle that's probably available to you in your life.
I think that's a very, very interesting and useful insight, and it cuts across all professions. As you rightly said, it's not confined only to sport, but for anybody's chosen profession as well, taking individual responsibility for your own well-being as well. I think one last question before we...
Can I just, just a thought. Just what Paddy was talking, there's this researcher called Dr. Mihaly. I can't pronounce his surname. He's a Russian. So he's done research for over 30 years on flow state, and these are a couple of the things he says. You're your own leader, are you challenging yourself? Are you focusing on the positives? And, the final one is that's what brings you to your flow. Are you enjoying? So, these are the key, and I think that's where it comes. And I just wanted to tie it in to what we've been discussing, because that applies to every area of life, and especially in these times. So yes, I think, Paddy, thank you for that. It reminded me of Dr. Mihaly's research.
So one last question from my side, and then we'll open it up to the audience as well. For both Paddy and Chaitanya, what are the mental health obligations of sports federations or sports franchisees towards teams, towards athletes who they are responsible for? What would you say are their responsibilities in terms of mental health, ensuring mental health?
I can go. I'm happy to go here. I think something that we started the discussion with, and how, especially during lockdown, if we remember, a lot of the cricketers in particular came out, even including Phelps, about mental health concerns. And we're talking of serious concerns. You've got your stress related, you've got your suicidal aspect, suicidal ideation. So one thing I always say, and this is what even Mr. Prakash Padukone says, right, Prannoy, is looking after the well-being. Your athlete is in a good state overall, especially psychologically, mentally, then they are going to perform. So sometimes a lot of academies in particular, or just federations, have a psychologist or have someone for the sake of it, or they think you're a quick fix, and that does not work. Like Prannoy was saying, or like Paddy was saying, it's not a quick fix, and it shouldn't be. Like for me, when someone comes, I say, you cannot get dependent on me. That's not the aim. And I will not answer, every call that you make, because then you're giving me the entire power, right? So, but having someone and having access to, let's say each federation or each franchise, that, okay, you've got this person, you can approach. Second is also, what is the attitude of them towards mental health? And let me be very honest, I think in India, it's still something, which is just picking up, right? It's still, I remember when I started, people would say, pagal to nahi ho, I'm not crazy, why should I go? And it's not about pagal, it's about enhancing and peaking your performance. I mean, I'm glad that the younger generation is thinking different. So there has to be a shift in how you're introduced, right? Like, what is your role? Why have you come in here? And then I remember my favorite sports psychologist said, your role is not easy. Like, I think, Paddy, you come also with, a coaching background. So the way you're going to be accepted and the way I'm accepted just as a psychologist is very different. So there is that aspect of it's not magic. So I always tell, be it the individual or the team, how can I help you and the group to perform to the best? So, and we put ourselves out there as well. And, it's like any relationship, it takes time to build. It takes time to build. But in one line, I think it is, especially in these times, if we don't start paying attention now, we're just going to have so many concerns. It's even scary to start mentioning them.
All right. So I think the most interesting question, one of the most, is how Mr. Rajaraman has posed this on the chat as well. How have the mental health specialists looked after themselves, when in the bio bubble themselves?
Paddy, do you want to go, or shall I go?
Well, I
know
think, that...
Sorry, Prannoy, you want to go?
No, I'm saying they know all the tricks, so I think it's easy for them.
Well, the usual
sure.
thing, like, that they say that motor car mechanics, they fix everyone else's car, but their car's a mess, and financial analysts, there's a mess. So I think just I know sports psychologists and mental coaches, and in some areas, I'm one of them. We don't necessarily walk our talk. But it is, for me, I certainly believe that in whatever our role, in whatever our profession, we need to be walking our talk, and making sure that we're actually not just in what we say, but in the way that we live our lives, we're an example for other people. And in fact, as soon as you have any role of prominence, people look to us. And so just for me personally, for example, that different thing, it's not so much in a bio bubble, but I'm not a great swimmer, but I love the ocean, and surfing is now banned. So for me personally, I set myself the goal. I've got a 2-kilometer stretch of ocean. It's about 11 degrees. There's kelp, there's sharks, there's rocks, there's waves. And I've committed in 3 months to train to do a 2-kilometer open ocean swim through quite difficult conditions. And, just a simple example, we do need, then that was my different thing that I wanted to do for at least the first 3 months. So, do all of us walk our talk? Not necessarily, but it's ideal.
All right. I think One last question from the audience that I see on the chat is from Samir Subedar. Hi, Paddy. Having finished the sports coaching micro-credential from Deakin University, you've talked about opponents, conditions, and situations while preparing for tournaments. How do you suggest for any player to plan for conditions and situations in this particular period? What do the other panelists think about this?
So I think that's an excellent question that's asked there. So how do we plan for these situations and conditions in biobubbles? And although it's very early, the thing for me that is the most relevant is there are other people who have now had biobubble experiences. And if you have, whether you're a coach, whether you're whatever your role is in and around sport, is to pick up the phone and do your research, because the research is not yet readily available to all of us. So for example, going into the IPLs, we knew there were some Australian rugby league teams had been in biobubbles. The England cricketers had been in biobubbles and other sports. So what I did is I found somebody who could connect me to somebody who was in those biobubbles and that I could ask questions about what were the experiences, what were the challenges. And I think there is, if we look at, I'm sort of an optimist and look at, well, where's the opportunity to move ahead? I think there's an opportunity for all of us to move ahead now by understanding the unique challenges of our biobubbles more than other athletes, more than other coaches or sports psychologists or sports lawyers or whatever. Become the expert in biobubbles, because that expertise will be able to help you and whoever you're supporting get ahead, at least for the next year or so, until we all have the same information and knowledge about what are the challenges and the complexities of biobubbles. So if you want to find out how do you prepare for them, you've got to do more research and go to more effort than anyone else in your field to gather information from people who've already been through those experiences, and then take that information and apply it. And what it'll just mean is that you will be smarter than most of your peers. And I think almost for me, that's what I've certainly used in the corporate work that I'm doing at the moment, is I'm saying the way to get ahead now, we don't know what ahead looks like because things have changed so much. All we need to make sure is that we are in the top 5% of smartest people in our industry. And the way we get to the top 5% of smartest is we make sure we understand things better than 95% of people, and we apply that learning better than 95% of people. Then you're ahead of the curve of your peers at the moment, which will set you up for success. And whatever that success looks like, we don't know, because markets and economies are different now. Sports in front of empty stadiums with people who've been in biobubbles, the performance levels are possibly going to drop a bit. So we can't use old levels as our measure of success. It's just, are we smarter, fitter, better equipped than 95 or 90? In Prannoy's case, he needs to be smarter than 99% of badminton players around the world, and that will leave him at the front of the game. And whatever your field, do that. And that's how you prepare, is just do more homework than anyone else you know and be smarter.
I'm conscious of time, so I'll possibly stop here for now, and I'll hand it over back to Shan. We're dot at 1 o'clock, so just wanted to hand it back to Shan. Thank you, Paddy, Chaitanya, and Prannoy. Really enjoyed listening in to all the insights that you've had to share. It's been a wealth of experience that I think the panel, the audience will take away from this conversation. So thanks again, and back to Shan.
Thank you, Amrut. That brings us to an end of the SLPN Dialogue session. Thank you, Paddy, Prannoy, Dr. Chaitanya, and Amrut for taking the time out and speaking at our panel today. We are very grateful that you could make it here today with us. And if any of you would like to keep in touch with the SLPC has a monthly newsletter called Highlights. We have circulated the link if you'd like to subscribe to Highlights. That's all from us here today, and we'll see you next month for another session of the SLPN Dialogues.